Now, the very next verse in this Surah An-Nisa, by the way, we're not going to do the whole surah today, but just a couple verses. It says, give unto the orphans, yatim is the Arabic word for orphans, their property, and don't trade out or exchange the bad things from what you have with the good ones from them. Don't devour their substance and bring it into your substance, and, you know, all the while claiming that you're helping them, you know what I'm saying? And surely this is great ism. Does it say ism? Yeah, ism kabira. It's a big sin. It's not something small, but it's very big. There's two words in Arabic usually when we talk about sin. One is ism and the other one is masiyah. In this case, it's using ism. Instead, it's big sin kabira. Now, what is Allah talking about? Well, as you and I know, even today, parents can die before the child is mature, and then there could be wealth or some substance left behind for the child, and then it's a responsibility of somebody in the community to take over, and it could be a close relative, but it should be a Muslim, of course, for Muslims, and they would take over and protect this wealth, whatever it might be, and then give it to the child when they're old enough. It talks about testing them to see how old they are, how mature they are, before you give it to them. Be sure they'll be responsible for it, you know, and then give it to them. But what the custom was of the Arabs of the time, this is what ignorant Arabs used to do. They used to say, okay, here's a little girl, okay, I marry her. She's my wife. She's only 4 years old or 2 years old. Doesn't matter. It wasn't about sex, by the way. It was about money. By being married to her, I get everything, because in their custom, like the Christian custom of old, was that a man owns everything, including the woman herself. That's why the women have to take the name of the man. This is totally forbidden in Islam, that a man should own a woman or anybody. You don't own people. Even when you have indentured servants, you don't make them take your name. Now, in our country, we know slavery to be a very horrible thing because of the way they treated the people. But Islam didn't permit that kind of thing. It permits you to have indentured servants, but not to change their name and call them by your name. And also, you don't adopt people by putting your name on them, and you don't take their wealth away from them. And women also are not owned by you. So this was changing that, and it's saying to these people, give orphans their property, meaning when they're old enough, don't exchange your bad stuff for their good stuff. Don't eat up their substance and mix it in with yours. And all of this is a great sin. You got it? It's important to know this ayah before you read the next one. Don't read the next ayah till you read this one. Otherwise, you're reading it out of context. And you're not getting the right meaning. Because the next one says, and it uses the word wa'in, and it means and if, kiftum. What does kiftum mean? To have fear of something. Kiftum. If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the team, the girls, the young girls, the orphan girls, marry other girls of your choice. Now you're reading it in context. Otherwise, most people will tell you there's a verse in the Quran that says you can marry 4 women. You say, how does it go? They say, well, it says, marry your wives 2, 3, or 4 if you can be equal in treatment, otherwise marry 1. That's what it says, but that's the middle of the verse and didn't take into consideration the 2 verses before it. So you are not telling the truth when you read it like that. In context, clearly it says, and if you fear that you cannot deal justly with these orphan girls that we were just talking about, you still cannot marry them. Trying to get their wealth out of them. Regardless, if you know that in your heart, well, I don't know if I'd really be fair with her, then don't marry her. Rather, marry other women. But again, it's going to come something that they didn't have before in Jahiliyyah. There was no limit on how many wives they could have. Is that true or false? Very true. Some men had women like people have cattle. Herds. Herd of women. You've heard of women, right? Playing with the words. So we find now it says, marry other women. Ithna, thalatha, arba. 2, 3, 4, stop. This became a limit. And right away, the Arabs of the time would be like, what? You tell me how many wives I can have? Are you saying there's a limit? Yeah. Ithna, thalatha, arba. 2, 3, 4. That's it. And, here it comes. Now, this is the big condition. Only if you can treat them equally. So if you can't be equal with 4 women, you can only have 3. And if you can't be equal with 3, you can only have 2. And if you can't be equal with these 2, then you can only have wahed. And that's how it says it. I'm looking right at it. 1. Wahed. Then it continues, and you need to know this, what the rest of the verse. Don't ignore something just because you don't know how to explain it. Many of us, we don't know how to. If somebody comes to you and said, how come a man can have sex with his slave girl? You'd be like, what? What are you talking about? It's in the Quran. Oh! Because most of our imams don't want to deal with that for whatever reason. Maybe they're busy, I don't know. But look at what it says. Then it said, if you fear that you should not be able to deal justly with them, then marry only one. We got to there. Or, it still keeps going. That's not the end of the verse. Or those that your right hand possess. That is near to prevent you from doing injustice. What does your right hand possess? Well, Ibn Taymiyyah, one of the greatest scholars of Islam, did you know he never got married? Did you know that? Ibn Taymiyyah didn't get married. But he had what the right hand possesses. What does it mean? When they had those wars, he was fighting the Mongol wars, if you know about that. He was a great jihadist. They would call him an extremist jihadist today, because he fought in these wars against the invasion of the Mongols, Tatars. And whenever, you see, Islam has so many rules about everything. You can't just make up your own way. If you make up your own way, it's not Islam. Because Islam has something for everything. Just like if you buy a new printer. Maybe you didn't ever operate a printer or a fax machine before. You get a manual with it. It tells you everything. It tells you, okay, here's all about how to use it as a telephone. Here's how you use it as a printer. This is how you use it as a copier machine. This is how you use it as a scanner. This is how you hook it up to a computer. You say, all I want to do is just send a fax. So you ignores all the rest of it. But still, in the manual, they're going to give you everything. And if you're smart, you'll read it. You'll read it, because then you'll know what you can do. You say, well, I never need it. No, but maybe you will. But at least somebody in your organization should read the whole manual, or at least keep it handy so that you can go through it. Does that make sense? You spent money for it. You got the machine, and I mean, come on. And there's the instruction right there. Otherwise, if you try to make up your own way, you don't read it. You just say, well, I'll push this button. And then weird stuff starts happening. Well, I'll open it up. I'll take stuff out. I'll shake it up. I'll turn it around. Now you got colors coming out weird, or you got stuff printing upside down, or the whole thing just like blows up, you know, because you're trying to make your own way with something that's already designed to be operated a certain way. Now, does it make sense? Okay, this is why you want to know what it's talking about. Islam gives rights, even in war. Even when there is a battle going on, there are certain rights for the soldiers and rights for the officers. There are rights for those whom are in the place of being invaded. Even your enemies have rights in Islam. Even the ones who are battling you, fighting you, still have rights. There's nobody else who's going to tell you that. Even in the Geneva Convention, in the last century, you didn't find the kind of rights that are provided in Islam for engagement of war. You don't find it. But here in Islam, it's clear. And one of the rights is about women. no women are ever to be injured, hurt, or, in any way, certainly not killed. So what happens in these battles when they go in and they win the battle, and now there are a lot of men who have died? The Muslims are responsible for them. You killed their husband, or you killed their father, you killed their brother. Even though you said they were fighting us, okay, fine, good, but you don't abandon them. You don't leave them like, in some cases where they just leave people in tents and refugee camps to rot. You couldn't do that. Islam doesn't permit that. You must provide for every single one of those people. Even the ones that were combatants who stopped, became prisoners basically, they still have rights. You still have to feed them, clothe them, shelter them, protect them, and let them understand what Islam is about. And if they become Muslims, you have to release them. Can you imagine this? I mean, I'm sorry, but just to make a present-day analogy to compare, suppose the Tamil Tigers of Sri Lanka, I'm not going to use the West and Christianity because that's too much. The people would never handle that here. Let me just use this. Go to Sri Lanka and talk about the Tamil Tigers and the Sinhalese. Everybody know what I'm talking about. The Sinhalese are the Buddhists. That's their religion. Tamil Tigers are Hindus. And they're fighting in the northern part for who knows how long, killing each other over and over in the northern part of Sri Lanka. Now, let us say, for instance, the Tamil Tigers, the Hindus, would take possession and win and be in authority. And some of the Buddhists would say, okay, guys, you took us capture now, but we'll become a Hindu. What's going to happen now? And they would say, oh, okay, you can go. You're a full citizen with us now. No problems. Would they do that? Not how it works. But definitely in Islam, that's what it's saying. Even some criminals in Islam, not with the exception maybe of murder, but some other types of crimes committed, stealing, things like that, and somebody memorizes Quran while they're in jail, they'll let them go. They'll let him go. You memorize the Quran, they let you go. If somebody memorizes the Bible, they let him go. Can't memorize it anyway. You wouldn't know what language to start in, would you? So we're finding out something here. Who are these women? These are women that you have to take in as protecting them. And they work. Of course they work. I mean, you didn't make them a queen because you took over their country. But at the same time, they're not a slave. Not in the sense of American slavery. That wasn't the idea whatsoever. Now, all women have needs. And you have to provide for their needs. And if the woman, she wants to have a husband or that kind of relationship, but she doesn't want to be a Muslim, maybe she's a Christian, for instance, or something like that, Islam is providing. And if you read the details and explanation behind this, then you'll begin to understand what it was talking about. Because a man can never have sex with a woman in Islam if he's not married to her. He just can't do that. He has to have something established, clearly established, so that if, for instance, if she has a child, that child has rights. And how will the child get any rights if there's nothing documented here? There's no fooling around in Islam, which is openly accepted throughout all of the United States, Canada, Europe, England. All of them accept that. The guy is just his girlfriend. Come on, man. This is very accepted, yes or no? A girlfriend. Especially if they're engaged. Wow. Engaged in what? Yeah, right. So what this is something making rights for these women so that it's not a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It is not this kind of fly-by-night stuff that these people are so used to assuming. And yet the same thing, it's the amazing part about it is that they can live in the squalor of this hog mentality of just do whatever you want to do with whoever you want to do it with, and then turn around and see this and say, oh, what kind of verse is this in your book? I know why you don't like it, by the way. You don't like it because there's commitment here. You don't like it because it makes you responsible for what you do, and they don't want responsibility. We want freedom, freedom, freedom. You know, that's what their big thing is. They said, Osama bin Laden, he doesn't like freedom. Well, I don't like Osama bin Laden, but that's the point. But what about freedom? What about freedom? What do you mean by freedom? Freedom to do whatever you want to do, right? Regardless of who you hurt. Regardless of who you take advantage of. Regardless of how you use your authority, your position to dominate somebody else. That's good. That's your freedom to do that. But without taking into consideration how the other person feels. That's what you're saying, really. And Frank Sinatra had a song about that. Some of you know, I know, anybody here ever listen to music? No, a bunch of Wahhabis. Okay. So in the song, he says, I did it my way. And we have a saying in Texas, my way or the highway. This is the opposite of the teaching of Islam. So I want you to read the whole verse. I want you to get the tafsir of the verse and study this before you'll go out here talking about what Islam says about women, women's rights, and marriage, and so on. It is permissible for a man, a Muslim man, even today, to have 4 wives. Nobody can take that away from him. The likelihood is almost nil because of all the Muslims in the world, less than single digit only of all of the Muslim men in the world, that's 1.7 billion people, have more than 1 wife. Did you know that? It's not a common thing. It's so uncommon that in the big countries, if you go to Indonesia, go to Malaysia, we were just in Malaysia, I think November, huh? And Turkey, this is a European Muslim country. Go to Saudi Arabia. Even in Saudi Arabia, where that's where I found the most people that do have at least 2 wives or something like that. But even then, it's still single digit. And it's so funny because when I'm having my programs, I get a little child up there and joke around with him. Maybe he's 12 years old. And I'll ask him, how many wives do you have? And everybody cracks up laughing. And if I even ask a senior person, how many wives do you have? They just start laughing. It's a joke, right? You're not really serious thinking I got more than 1 wife. So if it was something prevalent, if it was something that was so common, that would be a subject we would discuss in another matter. But when it's not even there, then you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, why am I defending myself and my religion in front of a group of people that have no problem at all having a wife and a, what would we call it, a concubine, a mistress, and a couple of floozies on the side? No problem. An untold number of children don't even know and don't care. And they're going to talk to us about having a legitimate relationship with a woman. Where we have to sign a document. We have to be responsible for her children, for her upkeep, and it has to be equal. Now I'm asking you guys, be realistic. How many of us are doing everything we can just to keep food on the table? Just to keep up with the cost of the house and the car and the insurance and stuff is costing us, and we're thinking, oh. And then somebody comes to you and says, by the way, would you like to, I've already got 2 jobs, by the way, trying to do that. Now, would you like to have another wife and double that? Are you sick? This is crazy. I can't. Now, in the case where a man is financially able to do it, in the case where a man can handle that and he wants to have 2 wives, it's his right. But you got another problem. You can only do that in a Muslim state. Because if it's illegal in this country to do that, and it could hurt your citizenship or put you in jail, then you got to think about, can I legally do that in Islam? Because if I go to jail, I can't take care of either one of them, can I? And if it's not legal, then one of the wives wouldn't have proper documentation. For instance, if a guy came to Islam, let's just use that. He came to Islam and he said, wow, I can have two wives. Okay, so he gets married to a lady, and now he wants to get married to another lady. Well, he can't get paperwork for the other lady legally. If he does, this is called bigamy here. You got a problem, a serious problem. I think it's in Texas. It's 4 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. But I did talk to him about it. I used to work in correctional facilities, and so I did ask, and I talked to some lawyers as well. They said, well, technically, yeah, but nobody's ever prosecuted it because it's not worth the trouble to go through it. You know, it's a big hassle, and they never saw it prosecuted. But still, the other thing is that you want to go for Hajj now. How are you going to go for Hajj? Because the woman has, if they're converts to Islam, they have to have a document that says that they converted, and then they have to have another document saying they're married, because she can't go without mahram. So how could they both have a document? And then when she has children, and so you can see some of the problems with this kind of thing that would occur. You won't be able to work it through. I think that it makes sense for the man to consider all of this before he starts even talking about subjects like that. And then keep in mind, too, that there is a big responsibility. And having two wives and two sets of children and all the rest of it can be very devastating to some men. It can actually cause you to crack up. So that's what we find here with this business of having more than one wife, and what we're talking about with that right hand possessed. Now you heard it from Islam. Now you heard it from the sources. If you have any more question about it, maybe you'd rather hear it. Maybe you speak Urdu, you can speak to your imam in Urdu about it, or Arabic. You can talk to somebody in Arabic about it that studies this subject, knows the practicalities, and they can help put your mind at ease about this thing.